One man jumped from a plane at 10,000 feet with stolen money and was never seen again. He didn't panic, he didn't rush, he didn't leave a single clear trace. No face, no fingerprints, no confession. Just money, a parachute, and a mystery. Somewhere over the Pacific Northwest, he disappeared forever. This case was investigated for decades, cost millions of dollars, and still has no answer.
November 24th, 1971. Portland International Airport, 2:50 in the afternoon. A man approaches the Northwest Orient Airlines ticket counter. He pays cash for a one-way ticket to Seattle, $20.
Now, here is the first mystery. Dan Cooper, not D.B. Cooper. That name, the one that would become legendary, was the result of a media mistake. A reporter misread a police teletype and wrote D.B. Cooper instead of Dan Cooper. The entire world knows him by a name that was never his, not even his fake one. It is as if history itself is conspiring to keep his real identity hidden. The flight boards at 2:50 in the afternoon. 36 passengers, 6 crew members. Northwest Orient Flight 305 is a short hop, just 30 minutes to Seattle. A milk run, the kind of flight where nothing ever happens. Cooper takes seat 18C, last row, aisle seat. He orders a bourbon and soda, then lights a cigarette. The flight attendant, Florence Schaffner, will later describe him as calm and polite, even courteous, not nervous, not sweating, not displaying any of the signs you would expect from someone about to commit a federal crime.
And somewhere over the Cascade Mountains, Dan Cooper hands Florence Schaffner a note. Here is what makes this detail so unsettling. Florence almost throws the note away. She thinks he is hitting on her. In those days, it happened constantly, passengers slipping phone numbers to flight attendants. She tucks the note into her pocket without reading it and starts to walk away. Think about that. The most famous hijacking in American history almost does not happen. All because a flight attendant assumes she is being flirted with. Cooper leans into the aisle and speaks quietly. "Miss, you would better look at that note. I have a bomb." Florence opens the note. The words are written neatly, in all capital letters. "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I will use it if necessary. I want you to sit next to me. You are being hijacked." She sits down. Cooper opens his briefcase just enough for her to see inside. Red cylinders, wires, a large battery. Florence will later testify it looks like dynamite, but she cannot say for certain. None of the passengers notice anything wrong. Cooper keeps his voice low, his manner calm.
He made his demands: $200,000 in $20 bills, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle. Once his demands were met, he promised to release all the passengers. Florence carried the message to the cockpit. The pilots contacted Seattle. The FBI was notified. Northwest Orient Flight 305 circled above Seattle for 2 hours while the ransom was assembled. During that time, Dan Cooper sat in seat 18C, chain-smoking Raleigh filter cigarettes and sipping his bourbon. He never raised his voice, never made threats. He even ordered another drink. At 5:39 in the evening, the plane landed at Seattle-Tacoma Airport, and that is when things start getting strange. Here is where the story takes its first genuinely weird turn. Cooper's demands were met exactly. The FBI delivered a knapsack containing 10,000 $20 bills, every serial number photographed and recorded. They also provided 4 parachutes, 2 primary chutes, and 2 reserve chutes. Investigators assumed Cooper planned to take a hostage. They wanted him to believe all the parachutes were functional, so none of them could be sabotaged. A Northwest Orient employee brought the ransom and the parachutes aboard. Cooper inspected them carefully, then he approved them, and then he did something that still puzzles investigators.
He released all the passengers and 2 of the flight attendants. He kept one, Tina Mucklow, the one he had specifically requested stay behind. The pilots and flight engineer remained in the cockpit, the door closed. Cooper was now effectively alone in the cabin with a single flight attendant, $200,000, and 4 parachutes. His new demand was precise: fly to Mexico City, but at minimum speed, no more than 170 knots. Landing gear down, wing flaps set at 15 degrees, below 10,000 feet, and keep the rear door unlocked. The pilots explained they could not make it to Mexico City under those conditions. The aircraft would burn too much fuel. Cooper agreed to a refueling stop in Reno, Nevada. At 7:40 in the evening, Flight 305 took off from Seattle, heading south. Now pay close attention to this timeline, because something impossible happens here. At approximately 8 o'clock, somewhere over southwestern Washington, Cooper told Tina Mucklow to go to the cockpit and stay there. He was going to lower the rear stairs, the aft air stairs, the stairway that extended from the rear of the Boeing 727. Tina complied. The cockpit door closed. At 8:13 p.m., the crew felt a sudden upward movement of the tail section. The pilots later described it as oscillation. Something had changed the aircraft's weight distribution. The pilots tried to contact Cooper through the intercom. There was no response. At 10:15 p.m., Flight 305 landed in Reno, Nevada. FBI agents and local police surrounded the plane. They opened the cabin door and entered, guns drawn. Dan Cooper was gone. So was the money. So were the 2 parachutes, one primary, one reserve. The rear air stairs were still extended, open to the night sky. Cooper had jumped somewhere over Washington state into complete darkness in a rainstorm, wearing a business suit and loafers. He jumped into one of the most inhospitable landscapes in the continental United States, the Cascade Wilderness. Dense forest, rocky terrain, freezing temperatures, zero visibility. Experienced skydivers would later describe a jump under those conditions as suicidal. Cooper was not wearing cold weather gear. He carried no survival equipment. The parachute he used was a military surplus chute designed for cargo drops, not precision landings. The reserve chute he took was a dummy, a demonstration parachute. It could not open. The FBI calculated Cooper's jump zone across rugged terrain north of Portland near Lake Merwin and Washougal River. They launched one of the largest manhunts in American history. Dozens of agents, military personnel, local volunteers, weeks of searching, then months, then years. They found nothing. No parachute, no money, no body, no trace of Dan Cooper. Until 1980. February 10th, 1980, Columbia River, near Vancouver, Washington. An 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was camping with his family along the river. As he dug in the sand, his fingers brushed against something buried. It was a rotted, mud-encrusted bundle of $20 bills. $5,800, 290 bills. The serial numbers matched Cooper's ransom. This discovery should have answered questions. Instead, it created dozens more. The money was found miles from the calculated jump zone. How it arrived there remains unexplained. The bills were stacked, layered, not scattered randomly. Geological analysis suggested the money arrived years after the hijacking, possibly as late as 1976. Where was Cooper's money for all that time? The FBI monitored banks, exchanges, and businesses nationwide for decades. Not a single other bill ever surfaced. Out of 10,000 marked bills, only 290 have ever been recovered. It is as if the money, like Cooper himself, simply vanished. Over the decades, hundreds of suspects have been proposed. The FBI officially investigated more than 800 individuals. Let me walk you through the most compelling ones and why each of them creates more questions than answers. Richard Floyd McCoy Jr. 5 months after Cooper's jump, he hijacked a United Airlines flight using an almost identical method. He demanded $500,000, 4 parachutes, and successfully parachuted into the Utah wilderness. He was caught 2 days later. McCoy was a former Army Green Beret, a Vietnam veteran, and an experienced skydiver and demolitions expert. He matched Cooper's general description. After his arrest, FBI agents found a D.B. Cooper wanted poster in his house. McCoy seems perfect, except he was 29 years old at the time. Every witness described Cooper as mid-40s. McCoy was in Las Vegas with his family on Thanksgiving weekend, according to his wife. No independent verification exists. In 1974, McCoy escaped from federal prison. 3 months later, he was shot and killed by FBI agents. He never confessed to being D.B. Cooper. Robert Rackstraw. In 2016, investigators claimed they identified Cooper as Rackstraw, a former Army pilot and explosives expert with a shadowy past. Rackstraw allegedly had CIA connections, matched Cooper's description, and had the skills: expert parachutist, pilot, comfortable with explosives. He was interviewed by the FBI in 1979, but never charged. He denied being Cooper until his death in 2019. Letters supposedly linking him remain unverified and unpublished. Dwayne Weber. In 1995, his widow came forward claiming Weber confessed on his deathbed, "I am Dan Cooper." Weber had nightmares about jumping from planes. He pointed to a location near the Columbia River, claiming it was the site of the hijacking. After his death, his widow found a Northwest Orient ticket stub in his belongings. Weber had a criminal record, matched the age and description, but DNA testing was inconclusive. Kenneth Christensen. A flight attendant claimed her late brother, a former paratrooper and airline employee, was Cooper. Kenneth had intimate knowledge of the Boeing 727, served in World War II, suddenly had unexplained money after 1971, and allegedly joked about leaving airlines creatively. But he was 5'8", 150 pounds. Every witness described Cooper as 5'10" to 6 feet and 170 to 180 pounds. Can witness testimony be that wrong? Let me lay out what does not make sense about this case. The more you examine the evidence, the more contradictory it becomes. Who was D.B. Cooper? Multiple witnesses provided detailed descriptions, yet none of the suspects matched those sketches. Cooper's tie was tested for DNA. Scientists found particles suggesting he worked with titanium and rare metals, narrowing the suspect pool to aerospace or chemical engineering. None of the primary suspects fit. Did Cooper survive the jump? Experienced skydivers say it was survivable, dangerous but possible. The FBI agreed someone trained could have done it. But Cooper took the wrong parachute. The reserve was a dummy. If he attempted to use it, it would have killed him. Did he know? Did he check? What happened to the money? If he died, where is it? If he survived, why didn't he spend it? Why bury less than 3% and leave the rest? And how did the specific bills end up at Tennebar, miles from the jump zone, years later? Why hasn't the parachute been found? Parachutes are large, durable, and don't biodegrade. Even in the wilderness, it should have been discovered. Was Cooper alone? Perhaps there was an accomplice on the ground, someone who retrieved him, disposed of evidence, and helped him disappear. It would explain the missing parachute, the unspent money, and the Tennebar bills planted years later. But if so, who was it, and why never come forward? In 2016, the FBI officially closed the D.B. Cooper case. 45 years, thousands of leads, millions of dollars spent, no resolution. The hijacker remains unidentified. Particles on the tie. In 2011, scientists found titanium, aluminum, and stainless steel, materials used in 1970s aerospace, Boeing manufacturing, or chemical plants. It's the closest thing to a fingerprint, yet no suspect matched. Where did Dan Cooper work? What was he building? The second letter. In 1972, newspapers received letters allegedly from Cooper. Most were hoaxes, but one contained details never released to the public. The writer knew the plane interior,
Tina Mucklow's uniform, even the type of bourbon Cooper ordered. The FBI never authenticated or released it. The witness who recanted. In 2008, one flight attendant said the FBI sketches didn't look like Cooper. She remembered him as refined, well-dressed, with kind eyes. She had told investigators in 1971 that he seemed familiar, possibly another Northwest employee. The FBI dismissed it. The missing evidence. In 2020, researchers discovered that Cooper's tie, cigarette butts, and the original note had disappeared from FBI archives in the 1980s. How do you lose evidence from one of the most famous cases in American history? Was it incompetence or something else? Let me leave you with something that will haunt you.
In 2007, an anonymous source contacted a journalist claiming to have information about D.B. Cooper. They provided photographs taken in the 1970s showing a man matching Cooper's description in a small Wyoming town. The photos were grainy and inconclusive. The journalist found records of a man living in that town from 1972 to 1979, paying cash for everything, keeping to himself. Then he disappeared with no forwarding address. Tracing him further, she found military records showing airborne service, newspaper clippings about a robbery investigation in the 1960s, and then the trail went cold. Records before 1960 vanished. It was as if he didn't exist. Was this Dan Cooper? Did he survive the jump, lie low for 8 years, then disappear again? Or was this another ghost, another dead-end lead? The journalist tried to publish her findings, but her editor killed the story, calling it too circumstantial. She never wrote about it again. What if Dan Cooper didn't jump alone? What if he was never meant to survive? What if the hijacking was a message, a demonstration, a test of something larger? In 1971, airplane hijackings were common, but Cooper's hijacking was different, too clean, too professional. He knew the plane, the fuel limits, the aft stairs, law enforcement protocols. He knew too much, and then he jumped into a storm with a dummy parachute, carrying $200,000 he would never spend, unless he was never planning to land. 53 years later, we are no closer to solving this mystery than on Thanksgiving Eve, 1971. Somewhere in the Washington mountains, there might be wreckage we'll never find, or there might be nothing. Or maybe Dan Cooper walked out, buried his parachute, stashed his money, and began a new life. Or perhaps, and this is the most disturbing possibility, he was never meant to be found. The unsolved mystery itself was the point, a perfect crime designed to be forever unfinished. In 1985, an anonymous book claimed inside knowledge, Dan Cooper is not missing. Dan Cooper is exactly where he intended to be. The book was pulled, the author never identified. On page 247 of the original printing, a paragraph reads, "The man who jumped from Flight 305 knew he wouldn't survive. Months, maybe weeks left. He chose the sky over a hospital bed, mystery over obituary, and he took the one thing no one could steal, the perfect secret." I don't know if that's true, but somewhere right now there's a briefcase of disintegrating $20 bills that will never be spent, a parachute tangled in a Douglas fir, bones of a man or a living person who outwitted the FBI, or maybe just a ghost story. Dan Cooper, whoever he was, he's still out there. The only question is whether out there means alive, dead, or something we don't have words for yet. Sweet dreams.